What a day. And night. Week, month, year, several years, it all blurs together. No barber, no problem. No beer in hand. Easy fix. Hey, party time over here. How you doing, sweet cheeks? Scales are back in, I see. Hey girl, nice horns. Are they sturdy? I've got one good grip in hand. Oh, hey now. Well, they're starting to not sound so friendly. Wait. No. Alright, that's it. Say hello to my little booms. Oh, that's right. All out of boom. Shouldn't be a problem, I'll be right with you. I've always got the old trusty chainsaw. Wait a tick. Where's my chainsaw? Oh no. This does not look good, and neither do they. Oh, I know. Nearest S-Mart, double time! I hope you're not sick of my weird cosplay intros yet. They're only gonna get weirder from here, just fair warning. Take a look at all the stuff we have laid out here on the table. This is most of the stuff you'll need to, believe it or not, make a cosplay-safe, convention-safe chainsaw hand from Evil Dead. Yeah, some of the stuff is gonna make you look weird when you're at the hardware store picking it up, but the one main ingredient that won't make you look weird is a full gallon of Arizona green tea, so I hope you're thirsty. And there are a few harder to find things that we'll need along the way, and I'll just leave it all in the description, including these weird like conduit elbow joints and like a L thing with a case. I don't know what this thing's called, but anyways, you're gonna want to get it all prepped for primer and paint. With most of this being plastic, you're gonna want it nice and rough so it receives the primer and the paint with no problem and no future chipping. Isopropyl alcohol is a great solvent to get rid of all that excess dirt and dust and debris so you can actually lay down the primer nice and smooth. And the thing about Arizona tea jugs these days is they don't use those conventional sticker labels. They're like painted onto the surface. Some of it's sticker, but it was impossible to peel off. So if you're lucky and you can find one of those tea jugs that actually has a sticker that you can just peel off easily, go with that. I had to use some really abrasive methods to get rid of that label, and honestly, halfway through I was sick of it. Paint prep is not my thing. It's never been my thing. I hate it. It's my least favorite part of any process. So I just gave up and we're gonna go for the worn look. Yeah, let's lean into that. It's gonna be battle damaged. Yeah, we'll say that. This whole chainsaw hand has a lot of different colored parts, so I'm trying this new process where we do the painting before we put it all together. So maybe that will shave off a little bit of time and effort of taping things off and making sure that the lines are clean if we were going to paint this after. But we're gonna try something new. We're gonna paint it before we put it all together and see how it goes. And some of the weirder parts with this build are this weird like rubber hose connector thing and this interesting little rubber gasket that goes at the bottom of the top part of your toilet to connect that top part of the toilet to the bowl. So it kind of is perfect to an extent. Ash's chainsaw is kind of unique because it has this giant exhaust grating on the side, like an exhaust vent. So I needed to find something that looked like a vent that, obviously you're not going to find a piece of metal unless you fabricate it yourself that looks like the vent on his chainsaw. This PVC end pipe grating drain sewer thing fit perfectly into that gasket. Like magic, the two things came together, and it took me forever to find these things, but magically the rings inside the gasket fit the rings of the PVC end grating, and wow, it was kismet, as they say. Make sure everything is primed before we move into the next step, which is painting. And for the colors, I wanted to go a little more old school, a little more rustic, so you don't want to go with the bright red that you see in some of the films, because then, your blood splatters won't show up. And then I started with some black underneath to make the shadow even stronger before I added that dark orange. So I came up with this weird painting technique that will add a little more character to it in the long run. At the bottom of these Arizona tea jugs, they have this weird ripple indentation. I don't know, maybe it's for grip or something so you don't drop your tea or it doesn't slip off the table. I don't know. I painted it at an angle so it looks like a little heat vent because, with power tools, they get hot sometimes. So it looks like a little heat is coming out from under the vents if you see it at an angle. Kind of interesting. Most of the pieces are black except for the outer ring of the vent, that weird toilet gasket thing, and the tea jug, which is that dark orange, and the blade, of course, which we have some nice shiny silver paint for. And lay a nice thick silvery coat of that paint down, almost so it's reflective. Look at the light gleaming off that baby. So for the vents, I did not want to tape off each individual slot, so I just took a black paint marker and drew the slots in myself. We're all about working smarter, not harder, people. And this next part was at first frustrating, but actually pretty satisfying by the end. As you can see, I'm trying to slice off that top of the jug with a rotary tool of all things. and it was just being fussy, so I just got a nice strong steak knife. This thing sliced through like butter. Some of the parts got a little thicker, like where the handle is, and it was a little more difficult, but most of it just slid through nice and easy, and it was pretty satisfying by the end. Just make sure you have a sharp enough knife, and be careful. It goes without saying, people, be careful. But the JetFalco channel is not liable for any sort of injury that you may incur during the creation of your chainsaw hand. Just a legal disclaimer there. This is just all suggestions. I'm not training you and teaching you how to live your cosplay life. You do you. Yeah, you're gonna want to cut a hole that is big enough to fit that rubber and metal flange that we just painted. Speaking of painting, I will be doing touch-ups throughout. And during those touch-ups, I grabbed a can of old glittery bronze paint that I had sitting on a shelf, and I just drizzled it lightly over the top of some of the darker metal pieces and plastic pieces. And then I took that old rag with the alcohol still in it and just rubbed it down just a little bit, a light rub here and there to really give it that battle damaged look. As you can see, I kind of really liked the way that worked, and I was just doing it off the cuff. It's all improv here. Most of it looked pretty damn good, so I kept it going with all of the minor parts. Note about our blade here. I traced out the shape and size, and yeah, I definitely overestimated. I made my blade cartoonishly big, that it more looks like a caricature of the chainsaw hand that Ash uses, so this was a commission for a very dear client of mine who wanted to be Ash Williams for a big event, a wedding actually. So I wanted to make it more memorable than a typical smaller bladed chainsaw that you see in the stores these days. More like the 80s chainsaws that are just massive. Damn boy, that blade thick! And a cool little hack you could use for that curved end is just use that flange that came with that rubber gasket. You know, the one you're going to use for the sleeve. Trace around the edge of that and you'll get a perfect circle if you're going for a thicker size blade like this. Otherwise, you're on your own. I mean, you came to YouTube, right? You're not on your own. Good luck! I used a cheap jigsaw to cut out the blade from this wood. And by the way, this piece of wood is special. It's actually a really tall baseboard. You know, the boards that you see at the end of your walls next to the carpet. This is a really tall baseboard that came in white. It was like, I don't know, $3 a yard. It's not too bad at all. But it was a little thick. So if you want to just get normal baseboard, it's cheap and it's very easy to work with. That jigsaw just ripped through it. Don't forget to paint the edges to match the silver on top and bottom. Next, you're going to need an inch or an inch and a half thick dowel. We're going to take a measurement of about 6.5 to 7 inches. I believe that's the inner diameter of the tea jug. This will be your handle, so cut that right off, and then you're going to make another one that's about 4 inches long. This will be your ripcord handle, and for an added effect, sand the edges of that ripcord handle to make it look like a ripcord handle, something nice and, you know, ergonomic, as they say, friendly to the fingies in the hand skin. Next, take a pick and score a hole on each side of that ripcord handle and just drill straight through, because this is where the actual cord or just a string will go through and attach to the chainsaw. You don't have to make an actual functional ripcord that has a spring that like goes back and coils within. That's way too much work. We're just gonna use a shoestring. It'll be nice and easy. It'll still look like a ripcord, but it won't have the rip of the cord. We can mime that. It's fine. You can get these really small samples of wood stain at your local paint shop for free if you just ask. I know, isn't that weird? Free stuff still exists. You just have to ask. That's the scary part though, right? Asking? Leaving the house? Even scary. Why are you here? Why are you cosplaying? Ah! With this cheap stain, it kind of looks more like a user-friendly handle instead of just a piece of wood. Now this part is a little detail intensive and it takes some time, but it is very satisfying at the end because we are creating the chain on the chainsaw blade using really cheap, thin chain that you can find at any hardware store. Just go to the ropes and chains aisle and look for not a typical like oval chain. I don't know, it has a special name. You'll find it. But this part's actually really easy. All you do is you lay a little bit of glue down and then you put in a screw, like every maybe 6 inches, another screw, more glue, another screw, lining it up with the edge of the blade. And by the end of it, it will look like a real chainsaw blade, believe it or not. I mean, if you get real close, you can tell it's not sharp, but that's why I say you got to get that special chain with the edges and the texture so it looks sharp, because they're more triangles than ovals. Like a playground swing set has chains that are ovals, you know what I'm saying? This kind of chain is more triangular. And wouldn't you know my random dumb luck, I actually cut it to the perfect size with this thick blade. We have the perfect amount of chain. That sort of luck never happens in my life, but wow, it just kind of lined up. And then we're going to take some abrasives like this wire brush, and we're going to create more texture to the blade. Like I said, battle damaged and worn look, we're going to make it look like it's sliced through its fair share of materials this blade has gone through. It has not kept its shape and form. So I'm gonna just throw stuff at it, bang on it, and scrape it up until it looks like it's been used, alright? This part's fun, not gonna lie. Alright, roll to see if anyone's actually watching, and I don't know about that. Take your silver spray can and add a little bit more silver to the edges where you added that chain, because some of those bolts might not be silver. You want to kind of blend it all together. And then, of course, everyone's favorite part, you gotta add some blood, right? This is a chainsaw used in a horror franchise. You gotta have a little bit of blood. So we're just gonna start with a little bit of tease for now. We're not gonna add all the blood quite yet. And since blood doesn't actually dry red, I'm going to add a little bit of darker red, maybe some brown to it, bronze. It'll look more like real blood than just cartoony blood, as cartoony as the blade looks. Okay, last time me mentioning how thick this blade is, but it is thick. Back to the weird toilet seat gasket thing and the PVC drain pipe end fitting. Weirdly enough, like I said, they do fit together. The grooves inside the gasket almost match perfectly the grooves outside of the PVC end fitting. So we're just gonna lay some glue down and just let it sit. The pressure from the stretch that you'll get with that gasket will mate the two hot glued pieces together. And if you're having any trouble trying to find these weird pieces in the plumbing aisle at your local hardware shop, feel free to 3D print them or make them out of cardboard. Honestly, it's a pretty simple shape. This little contraption actually came together quite nicely. There's just one downside, however. It is a little big compared to the tea jug. You'll see once we put it all together. And speaking of putting it all together, I randomly decided to put a coat of clear sealant on just so I could have a little bit of leeway when I'm finagling it and putting it together. You will need some excessive force at times to get this all from several random pieces to one cohesive giant piece, so you don't want that force or hard edges rubbing against each other to damage the thing and actually look like a tea jug. You want it to look like a chainsaw. So maybe the sealant will help. Just make sure you let it cure for about a day or two. Sealant can be really picky at times when you're adding it to things like plastic and metal. When in doubt, just give it more time. Let's see how that random exhaust vent will look on the side here. Like I said, it is a little big. It can barely fit on the side there. Yeah, it's definitely too big. So to alleviate that, I'm going to bring it closer to the thicker part of the tea jug by cutting out a little bit to fit into that little extra piping there, that little nub of a pipe that we've got sticking out of that conduit edge. And to make it a little easier, let's actually connect the pipe and conduit. This thing was made to be put on a cosplay chainsaw arm, because you can just take apart the little maintenance hatch panel. It has two screws, and those screws can easily just fit into two newly drilled holes into the edge here. So once you get the panel lined up with the edge inside, and find your holes with the screws, you can just attach the whole thing and it's not moving anywhere. It feels good, man. And to get those nuts and screws to really stay together for the long haul and for all the movement you'll be doing on the convention floors, you're going to want to use medium strength to high strength thread locker. This stuff sets into the threads of the screw, kind of like a mild super glue, so that those screws will not budge with any sort of vibrations you might be making when you're moving around doing cool poses with your new prop. It's one of the cool car hacks I learned from working on my car over the few years I've had it. Mechanics use thread locker for all sorts of mods on their car, and I figured I'd bring it on over to the cosplay world. Why not? So to make sure that giant exhaust vent actually fits on this thing without looking too awkward, I'm going to cut a little piece out of that gasket that we super glued, so it'll look a little looser since the fit isn't perfect, but you know, some corners you gotta cut. While some things magically fit together with no problems, other things are not going to be so perfect. So once I cut a little piece to compensate for the largeness of the vent, we can move it closer to the conduit piece. So now that awkward exhaust vent isn't so awkward. I guess. As big as it is, it's always going to look awkward, but now it has space. I'm just now realizing I probably should have just sawed off that round piece on the end there. You know, it is what it is. It's going to be nice in the end, you'll see. With a little bit of hot glue and some nuts and bolts, it's going to be stuck to the tea jug for good, and hey, From a distance, this exhaust vent actually looks pretty good. Just make sure you don't use screws that are too deep or long so they're not rubbing against your skin when you're actually holding the thing. Alright, so now you gotta take a measurement on how big your blade is compared to the edge of where the blade will insert itself into the side of the chainsaw body. You're going to want to cut a hole using whatever cutting tool you have that is best. Mine was that steak knife from earlier. It just sails through this thing. And once you get a slot that is long enough, you can get that blade fitted in there. But we're not done yet. We have to attach it somehow so it doesn't go flying when we're doing our cool Ash Williams poses. So I got one of these metallic dryer outlet plates. I thought it would be a nice little effect since it's made out of this nice steel metal that kind of matches the blade. And it has 3 big holes that are great for attaching the perfect kind of screws to go through the wood blade, permanently connecting itself to the body of the chainsaw. This dryer outlet plate is kind of another compensation trick because the top of the jug that we initially cut off isn't going to be big enough for this ginormous thick blade we ended up putting through here. And I also cut off the spout of the top because we're going to be smoothing that off and using it as our gas cap cover that will go on the top of the chainsaw. You'll also want to smooth off the other side as well because a giant washer is going to go there to hold the whole thing into place. Now I'll move our focus to this rubber gasket and metal flange that was supposed to be for ginormous sewage PVC piping. We are going to be using it for our arm hole protector. So it won't look that cheap. It's going to actually look like an Evil Dead chainsaw hand once you get the connector piece in there. You don't want anyone seeing part of your nub, do you? Now that would be embarrassing. So go ahead and adjust the whole thing so it'll slide into the diameter of the T-jug hole. And then we're going to take these cupboard connector plates and bend them to a shape that will contour the flatness of the flange and the angle where the T-jug meets up to it. One of the more annoying parts of this build is actually drilling through the metal of the flange. That takes a while. So with a little bit of persistence and elbow grease, you'll hopefully eventually get through. You could also score a hole with a pick to keep your drill bit straight and focused and not slipping around. I noticed it did help to start with a smaller bit size and then gradually move up to bigger bit sizes to match the holes of the plates as well as the size of the nuts and bolts that are connecting. Everybody will cut these holes different, so your angles will be different where your connector plates will be installed. Especially when you add those bottom pieces, the angle will be way shallower than the piece that is connected to the handle, since where the flange and the bottom of the T-jug meets up is a lot less drastic. Just make sure to use at least 2 plates on the bottom so the tension in the whole thing is evenly distributed as you're moving it around. Now here we have another one of my favorite pieces to add to this build. It's a simple on-off switch that you can get for a couple bucks at your local hardware store. It's really cool because it comes with this on-off label and the parts needed to affix it to the body. Simply drill a hole big enough to insert it through, add the tiny little label plate that goes around it and the parts needed to keep it in place, and it is done. I added a little bit of shadow to it with some Sharpie, and this thing looks awesome. It sounds awesome too. Check this out. Yeah, now we're cooking with power. Sorry, it's addicting. Okay, I gotta stop. Now we'll be adding our ripcord. Drill a hole into the side somewhere near the top of the vent. Insert a shoestring or some sort of rope. Tie it off so that once you pull it back through it won't slip out, and then add your newly stained and dried ripcord handle. You could always use a pick or something small to fit that string through the tiny holes of the dowel and the hole that you just drilled through the side of the body. And look at that thing. Though it doesn't move and rip and retract like a real ripcord handle, it still looks like a ripcord handle. Just don't pull it or you'll obviously break it. I mean, come on, cosplay is like 50% imagination, right guys? Speaking of dowels, let's get that 6.5 to 7 feet long dowel that we cut, slide it through the middle and see if it fits as a handle. Simply drill holes through the middle of the jug where you want your handle to be and through the middle of the dowel so that it will connect. Affixed with some screws and some washers, and there you have it. That is the simplest, easiest handle you could have, so this thing will stay fixed to your nub of an arm. And now you can hot glue the spout and the cap to the top of the chainsaw body. And now we have our gas cap. This thing runs on pure 93 unleaded. High octane, baby. Now you're going to want to get the whole thing nice and level because we'll be drilling a giant hole through the opening of that dryer outlet panel. This is where we'll be staking a big old bolt to keep the blade and the body together forever. And I'm also adding this random accent piece to the end of the body here to weigh it down, and because it has 3 nice holes where we can put 3 more bolts to affix the end of the blade to the end of the body for a nice balanced effect, eliminating any sort of potential wobble effect whatsoever. And here is the giant washer and the giant bolt that will be glued to the top here of the spout that we cut, permanently stuck to the chainsaw itself. So it kind of looks like the chainsaw blade opening protector. Like I said, the blade be thick, but hey, it still looks kind of cool if you're into that like cartoony chainsaw look. Don't forget to insert that elbow joint into the conduit holder there, and I added a little end cap to the elbow joint as well to make it a little smoother, make it look like a handle. And hey, a little bit of blood effects here and there, and some holes on the bottom to vent so you don't get sweaty while you're holding this thing all day. And hell, why not some more clear coat to make this thing nice and shiny? Now let's go see if this thing does the job, shall we? Oh, hold up. Okay, what's the trick to getting this thing going again? Technical difficulties. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's more like it. She is purring like a born-again cuda. The king is back, baby. No, but seriously, I know my Bruce Campbell impression is terrible, but check this baby out. Are you not, I want to say, bizarrely impressed? I don't know. Yeah, it definitely looks a lot more cartoony than I originally had planned for. But yeah, maybe next time I'll make the blade a little thinner. But hey, it looks presentable. Like if you saw this at a convention, you would know this is Ash Williams from Evil Dead, right? All you need is a blue shirt, some khakis, and a boomstick. And his award-winning smile. I've never done a Bruce Campbell impression in my life. This is my disclaimer saying don't put any weight into my impression of Bruce Campbell. But thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to all my patrons who love and support me and all my content. I love you guys. You're the best. And thank you for sitting through another weird cosplay video. I do like one a year. So yeah, if you have any suggestions for next year, let me know. And I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully sooner rather than later.